It was a warm summer evening in suburban Chicago, with a breeze carrying the smell of grilled burgers and freshly cut grass. The backyard of Ethan's friends Tom and Emily was filled with people. Wooden tables covered with checkered tablecloths were laden with food: bowls of potato salad, plates of corn on the cob, bottles of beer in ice buckets. Strings of yellow lights hung overhead, and a portable speaker played soft music, some old rock. The guests, about 30 of them, chatted, laughed, and moved from one group to another. Ethan, a 35-year-old marketing consultant, stood at the grill, beer in hand. His dark hair was neatly combed, and a light blue polo shirt accentuated his athletic frame. He was witty but slightly withdrawn, the result of several failed romances that had left him wary of new acquaintances. Tom, the host, flipped steaks on the grill and told a joke about his boss. And he says, "Tom, you've got to think outside the box." And I'm like, "Dude, I'm not in a box at all." Tom laughed, and Ethan smiled politely. "Classic," Ethan said, sipping his beer. "Has your boss ever suggested anything smart?" "Never," Tom shook his head. "But he pays me, so I nod and pretend to listen." Ethan nodded, but his gaze slid across the courtyard. He spotted a woman he hadn't seen before. She was standing at the drinks table, talking to Emily. She was laughing, and her laughter was loud, infectious. Ethan felt his curiosity peak. "Who is this?" he asked Tom, nodding towards the woman. Tom looked at her and grinned. "This is Emily's friend Lee. She's a freelance graphic designer. Want to introduce her?" Ethan shrugged, trying to look unconcerned. "Why not?" Tom called Emily over, and she, noticing her husband's gesture, came over with Lee. Lee was holding a glass of white wine. Her eyes, bright green, immediately caught Ethan's gaze. "Ethan, this is Lee," Emily said, smiling. "Lee, this is Ethan, our friend from the marketing world." "Hi," Lee extended her hand, her smile confident. "Marketing, huh? Selling people something they could live without just fine?" Ethan shook her hand, slightly surprised by her directness. "Sometimes, but mostly I try to convince them that they want what they need anyway." Lee laughed. "Good answer. What do you do when you're not selling dreams?" "I read," Ethan said. "Well, and sometimes I try not to burn out at work." "Reading?" Lee raised an eyebrow. "What exactly?" "Mostly science fiction. Dystopias, like 1984 or The Handmaid's Tale." Lee's eyes lit up. "Really? I love dystopias. Name your top 5 books, right now." Ethan grinned, accepting the challenge. "Okay, Orwell's 1984, Zamyatin's We, Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, Huxley's Brave New World, and maybe Animal Farm. That's more satire, though." Lee crossed her arms, looking at him appraisingly. "Not bad. But Animal Farm? Really? I'd put King's The Running Man instead." "King?" Ethan shook his head. "It's more of a thriller than a dystopia." "That's debatable." Lee took a sip of wine. "The Running Man is a world built on exploitation. It's a dystopia, just with action." Emily and Tom looked at each other, smiling. "You seem to have found common ground," Emily said. "We'll leave you to argue about books." They walked away, and Ethan and Lee continued their conversation. They went to one of the tables, where there were fewer people, and sat down on wooden chairs. Lee put her glass on the table and leaned a little closer to Ethan. "So," she said, "why dystopias? What is it about them that grabs you?" Ethan thought for a second. "Probably the way they show what could go wrong. People think they have everything under control, and then bam, you're in a world where you can't trust anyone. What about you?" "I like how they make you think," Lee replied. "You read them and realize that we're not that far from those worlds. Plus, they're always about struggle. Someone always resists the system." "Like Winston in 1984, Ethan asked. "Exactly," Lee nodded, "even though he lost. But at least he tried." They continued talking, jumping from books to movies to their favorite adaptations. Ethan noticed that Lee spoke with enthusiasm, her hands gesturing and her eyes sparkling. She wasn't just charismatic, she was captivating. Several times, he caught other guests glancing in her direction, but Lee didn't seem to notice. "What do you read?" Ethan asked. "Besides dystopias." "Oh, I'm omnivorous," Lee smiled. "Detectives, fantasy, sometimes even romance, if I'm in the mood. The last book I finished was Dune. Have you read it?" "Yeah," Ethan nodded. "Classic. Although I'm more of a fan of the first book than the sequels." "I agree," said Lee. "First, fire, then too much philosophy." They were silent for a moment, and Ethan felt his usual reserve slip. Lee was unlike any woman he had dated before. She was outspoken, witty, and seemed genuinely interested in him. "Are you always so good at getting along with people?" he asked. Lee shrugged. "Only with those who can hold a conversation. And you? You're not one to chat with everyone." "True," Ethan smiled. "I'm more of an observer than a talker. But I don't know, you're easy." "Is that a compliment?" Lee narrowed her eyes, but her tone was playful. "It looks that way," Ethan replied. At that moment, a guy in a plaid shirt, one of the guests, approached the table. Ethan didn't know him, but the guy was clearly familiar with Lee. He smiled broadly, looking at her. "Lee, where have you been?" he said. "I thought you promised to tell me about that logo project." Lee turned to him, her smile growing a little brighter. "Oh, Mike, sorry, I got caught up. The project is still in the works, but I'll tell you all about it later, okay?" "I hold you to your word." Mike winked at her and walked away, taking one last look. Ethan noticed Lee watching Mike leave, but then she immediately returned to talking to him as if nothing had happened. "So, where were we?" she asked. "Oh, yeah, Dune. Have you seen the new movie?" "Not yet," Ethan said. "Is it worth it?" "Definitely," Lee nodded. "The visuals are gorgeous. Although the book is, of course, better." They continued to chat, and time flew by. Ethan noticed that the sun had set, and the garlands overhead were the only source of light. The guests began to leave, but he and Lee were still sitting at the table, deep in conversation. Ethan felt like he didn't want the evening to end. "Listen," he said when they paused to sip their drinks. "Maybe we can continue this sometime. I know a great coffee shop with a used book section." Lee looked at him, her eyes narrowing slightly, but her smile remaining. "Are you trying to ask me out, Ethan?" And if so, he raised an eyebrow, trying not to show his excitement. "Then I'll tell you, yes." Lee took out her phone. "Give me your number." Ethan dictated the number, and Lee sent him a short message. "Lee, don't lose it." He smiled, looking at the screen. "I won't lose it," he said. Lee stood up, straightening her dress. "Okay, I have to go. Emily promised to give me a ride home. But text me, okay?" "Absolutely," Ethan replied. She left, joining Emily, who was already packing. Ethan watched her go, feeling something new ignite inside him: excitement, hope, anticipation. He didn't notice Lee, standing by the car, glance quickly at Mike, who was helping Tom clear the tables, and smile at him a little too long. Ethan finished his beer and headed to his car. 2 days after the barbecue, Ethan was sitting in his office, replaying the conversation with Lee in his head. Her text message, "Lee, don't lose it," was still glowing on his phone. He typed, "Hey, how about that coffee shop with the books? Saturday at 3. A minute later, he got a response. "Sounds great. Name the place, I'll be there." Ethan smiled and texted the address of Books and Beans in downtown Chicago. Ethan arrived early on Saturday. The coffee shop was cozy, wooden shelves lined with tattered books, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, and soft light from table lamps. He chose a table by the window, ordered an espresso, and waited, leafing through an old book he'd pulled from the shelf. Lee walked in promptly at 3, wearing jeans and a white blouse, with the same confident smile he remembered from the barbecue. "Are you reading already?" she said, sitting down opposite. "I thought we were going to have coffee here." "I can do both." Ethan closed the book and put it down. "You're just in time. That's rare." "I'm always on time," Lee winked and took the menu. What do you recommend? I don't really care for coffee. Their vanilla latte is good, Ethan said, or an Americano if you want something simple. Lee ordered a latte, then looked at the book he was holding. What are you reading? The Road by McCarthy, Ethan replied. Found it on a shelf, dark but gripping. Oh, I read it, Lee nodded. Father and son, post-apocalypse, all that. Do you like it? Yes, Ethan said, especially the way it shows that even in the worst world there is hope. Well, that's how you see it, Lee grinned. I think it's more about survival. Hope is already yours. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Are you always this, cynical? Not cynical, Lee shook her head. Realistic. But I'm not against hope if it works. The waiter brought their coffee, and they continued talking. Lee told them about her work, designing logos and covers for local publishing houses. Her eyes lit up when she talked about the projects, especially about how one client had chosen her design over dozens of others. I knew mine was the best, she said, stirring sugar into her latte. They couldn't have chosen anything else. You have a lot of confidence, Ethan smiled. That's good. And you? Lee looked at him. Tell me about your work. Marketing is all presentations and charts, right? Ethan shrugged. Sometimes, but more about understanding what people want. I help companies talk to their customers in a way that gets them heard. It sounds like psychology, Lee said. A little, Ethan nodded, just with a lot of coffee and deadlines. They finished their coffee and decided to wander through the second-hand bookshelf of the coffee shop. The shelves were filled with books of all genres, from classics to modern thrillers. Lee pulled out a tattered copy of Game of Thrones. Have you read it? She asked, turning the pages. The first book, yes, Ethan said. I couldn't get through the rest. Too many characters. Weakling, Lee laughed. I finished reading it all. There were such twists and turns, you would have appreciated it. Maybe you can convince me to try again, Ethan said, taking the glass castle from the shelf. Have you read this? Lee shook her head. No. About what? A memoir, Ethan said, about a girl who grew up in a weird family and made it out. It's tough, but inspiring. Sounds like my type. Lee put Game of Thrones back. Buy me one if you're so complimentary. Ethan smiled and took the book to the register. They left the coffee shop, each with a new book in hand, and decided to take a walk down the street. Chicago was buzzing with cars honking, people rushing about, and the air smelling of asphalt and street food. Lee was talking about her latest project, a fantasy novel cover, and Ethan listened, impressed by her energy. Are you always this enthusiastic? He asked as they stopped at a traffic light. Only when I'm interested, Lee looked at him. And you? You seem calm, but there's something about you. Something? Ethan raised an eyebrow. Yeah, Lee nodded. You're not just a guy with books. You think? That's cool. Ethan felt a warmth in his chest. He wasn't used to such compliments. His past relationships had ended because he was too serious or too private. Lee seemed to see something good in this. Their first date lasted 3 hours, and as they said goodbye at the subway, Lee said, "It was fun. Let's do it again." "Definitely," Ethan replied. "All right." Better not drag it out. Lee winked and left, leaving him with a smile. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Ethan and Lee met almost every weekend, and sometimes on weekday evenings. They went to restaurants for pasta and wine and argued about philosophy. One day, Lee insisted on attending a poetry reading at a small bookstore. Ethan wasn't a fan of poetry, but her enthusiasm was infectious. "Listen, it's like music," Lee said as they sat in the back row listening to the young poet. "The words just catch you." "Maybe," Ethan shrugged, "but I'm more into prose." "You just don't give me a chance," Lee nudged him with her elbow. "Try writing a poem. I want to see it." "Me? Poems?" Ethan laughed. "That would be a disaster." "I believe in you," Lee smiled. "If you write, I'll try too." They continued to whisper until the organizer asked for silence. After the readings, they went outside, and Lee suggested going to a nearby bar. There, over a glass of wine, she told them about her dream of opening her own design studio. "I want my name to be known," she said, her eyes glittering. "Not just Lee who makes logos, Lee whose work hangs in galleries." "That's cool," Ethan said. "Do you have a plan?" "Of course," Lee nodded. "First, I'll build a portfolio, then I'll find investors. I'm already working with a couple of big clients. They adore me." "I'm sure," Ethan smiled. Her confidence was infectious, but he noticed the way the waiter who brought them their wine lingered on Lee a little too long. Lee smiled back at him, and Ethan felt a slight twinge, but he brushed it off. She was just being friendly, he thought. Ethan began to open up too. On one date, at an Italian restaurant with red tablecloths, he opened up about his past. "I've had a couple of serious relationships," he said, swirling his wine glass. "But it didn't work out. One girl said I was two. In my head." Lee looked at him. "In your head? Is that bad?" "For her, yes," Ethan shrugged. "She wanted me to be more open, I guess." "I like what you think," Lee said. "It makes you interested. Not everyone needs that." Ethan felt relieved. Lee seemed to accept him as he was. He didn't notice how she sometimes diverted her attention to others, to the bartender who joked with her, or to a passerby who glanced over his shoulder on the street. To him, she was the center of their little world. A month after their first date, they found themselves back at Books and Beans. Lee arrived with a small box wrapped in brown paper. "This is for you," she said, holding out the gift. "Open it." Ethan was surprised, but he unfolded the paper. Inside was a book, an old edition of Orwell's 1984, with a tattered cover and yellowed pages. "Where did you find this?" he asked, leafing through the book. "It's rare." "At a second-hand bookseller," Lee smiled. "I knew you'd like it. You're a fan of this book, after all." "Lee, this is..." Ethan shook his head. "Thanks. This is really cool." "Please," she shrugged, but her smile was satisfied. "Now you have to give me something." "Deal," Ethan laughed. "I'll find something worthy." They sat in the coffee shop for another hour, discussing 1984 and other books. Ethan felt their connection deepening. Lee wasn't just beautiful and smart, she was someone he could be himself with. He didn't know that her competitive spirit and need for recognition were already beginning to manifest themselves in small things, in the way she caught the glances of others, how proud she was of her victories at work. As they said goodbye outside the coffee shop, Lee touched his arm. "This was the best date," she said. "Are you in for the next one?" "Of course," Ethan replied. "Name the time and place." "I'll think of something," Lee winked and left, leaving him with a book in his hands and warmth in his chest. 6 months after the barbecue, Ethan and Lee stood in his small Chicago apartment, surrounded by boxes. The floor was piled high with books, clothes, and dishes, and the air smelled of cardboard and coffee from the corner coffee shop. Ethan, in jeans and a gray t-shirt, was trying to unpack a box of kitchen utensils, while Lee was sorting through her things in the corner of the living room. "Seriously, Lee, how many shoes do you have?" Ethan picked up a pair of red shoes from the box. "This is the third box." Lee, in athletic shorts and a white top, laughed, pushing her hair out of her face. "It's not just shoes, Ethan. It's style. You'd understand if you ever tried wearing anything other than sneakers." "My sneakers are doing just fine," Ethan smiled, putting his shoes back. "But we need another closet, or two." "Relax," Lee came up and kissed him on the cheek. "We'll figure it out. The new loft is big enough." They decided to move into a spacious loft in the West Loop, with high ceilings, exposed brick walls, and large windows. Ethan was thrilled to start a new chapter with Lee. Their romance was whirlwind: dates, long conversations, trips out of town. Lee seemed perfect, smart, confident, with a spark that made him feel alive. When she suggested they move in together, he accepted without hesitation. The move was chaotic. Ethan lugged boxes while Lee moved in. By evening, they were sitting on the floor of their new loft, surrounded by unpacked things, eating pizza straight from the box. "This is our home," Ethan said, looking around the empty space. "Can you feel it?" Lee nodded, taking a bite of pizza. "Yeah, we just need a couch, and maybe a couple of paintings. I already know which ones." "Of course you know," Ethan chuckled. "You've already planned it all out, haven't you?" "Almost," Lee winked. "But I'll leave you with a couple of decisions, like where to put your stupid coffee table." "This table is a classic," Ethan feigned. "You just don't understand its charm." They laughed, and Ethan felt his heart fill with warmth. He looked at Lee, her hair wild, her eyes bright, and thought this was the beginning of something big. The next few weeks were busy with decorating. They bought a sofa, hung shelves, and Lee insisted on bright pillows and abstract posters. Ethan didn't mind her taste made the loft feel alive. They spent their evenings together, cooking dinner, watching movies, or arguing about books. But Ethan began to notice the little things. When they went out to eat, the waiters always smiled at Lee a little longer. People turned around on the street, and she seemed to enjoy it. He chalked it up to her charm. Lee was charismatic, and people were drawn to her. One day, when they were having dinner at a local bistro, the waiter, a young guy with tattoos, brought their order and said to Lee, "You look like a model. Do you come here often?" Lee smiled, adjusting her hair. "Thank you. No, we just came to try your risotto." "It's the best in town," the guy winked. "If you like it, come again." Ethan was silent, but he felt a little uncomfortable. When the waiter left, he said, "He was clearly trying to flirt with you." "Oh, come on," Lee rolled her eyes. "He's just doing his job. People always say that. It doesn't mean anything." "Maybe," Ethan shrugged, deciding not to dwell on it. Lee was right, she was getting attention, but that didn't mean she was reciprocating. To celebrate the move, they decided to throw a party. Ethan invited Tom, Emily, and a few co-workers, and Lee invited her designer friends and a couple of clients. The party was scheduled for Saturday, and Lee was in charge of the decorations. She hung fairy lights, put candles on the tables, and put together a playlist of indie rock and jazz. That evening, the loft was buzzing with voices. There were about 20 guests, all drinking wine, eating appetizers, and laughing. Ethan, in a navy shirt and jeans, stood at the kitchen island, talking to Tom. "A new house is a big deal," Tom said, holding up his beer. "You and Lee move fast." "Yes," Ethan nodded, "but it feels right. She's different." "That's right," Tom grinned. "She's like a hurricane. Are you coping?" "For now, yes," Ethan smiled, but his gaze slid to Lee. She stood in the center of the room, wearing a black dress that showed off her figure. She laughed as she told a story to a group of guests, including two of Ethan's friends, Mark and Jake. Mark, a work colleague, listened intently, and Jake, an old college friend, interjected with jokes. Lee was in her element, her gestures animated, her voice clear. Ethan noticed Jake touch her shoulder, laughing at her words, and Lee smiled back. "She knows how to keep your attention," Tom said, following Ethan's gaze. "Yes," Ethan nodded. "It's her superpower." He walked over to the drinks table to pour himself a glass of wine and heard Lee say, "And the client goes, 'Lee, that's brilliant.' And I'm like, 'I know, that's why you hired me.'" The guests laughed, and Mark said, "You should open your own studio. With your talent, it will be a hit." "Oh, I plan to," Lee winked. "Give me a couple of years, and you'll see my name everywhere." Ethan smiled, but felt his role at the party was reduced to that of an observer. Lee moved from one group to the next, charming everyone. She joked with Emily, discussed a design with a client, and then found herself back with Mark and Jake, who were all asking her questions. Ethan tried to join in the conversation, but Lee seemed oblivious to him. "Hey, Lee," he said, coming closer. "Maybe you could tell me about that logo you made for the publishing house." Lee turned around, but her smile was a little less bright. "Oh, it's just work," she waved her hand. Nothing special. Mark, you were talking about your trip to Japan. Go on. Mark began his story and Ethan walked away, feeling left out. He returned to Tom, who was now chatting with Emily. Are you okay? Emily asked, noticing his expression. Yeah, Ethan nodded. It's just, Lee's the center of attention, as always. She is, Emily shrugged. But she's with you, Ethan. That's the main thing. Right, Ethan forced a smile. He trusted Lee. She was bright, and people were drawn to her. That wasn't something to worry about. The party went on until midnight. The guests began to leave, and Ethan and Lee said goodbye to each at the door. When they were alone, the loft looked like a battlefield. Empty bottles, crumbs on the tables, crumpled napkins. A successful party, Ethan said, collecting the glasses. Really? Lee smiled, taking off her earrings. I knew it would be cool. Your friends are cool, especially Jake. He's funny. Yeah, he is, Ethan nodded, but his thoughts went back to the way Jake had touched her shoulder. He shrugged it off. It was just being friendly. They went to bed around 2 and Ethan was just drifting off when he heard Lee's phone vibrate on the nightstand. She grabbed it, looked at the screen, and he quickly cleaned it up. Who is it? Ethan asked, raising his head. Oh, just a friend, Lee shrugged. Write something about tomorrow. Sleep, I'll figure it out. Okay, Ethan closed his eyes, not caring. He trusted her. Lee was his partner, and their new life together was just beginning. The West Loop loft that Ethan and Lee now shared was almost completely furnished. Lee's posters adorned the brick walls, Ethan's books lined the shelves, and the new coffee table they'd picked out together graced the corner of the living room. But after 2 months of living together, Ethan was starting to notice cracks in their picture-perfect home. Lee began coming home later than usual. At first, it was rare she'd be an hour late, explaining that she was meeting a client or stuck in traffic. Ethan didn't think much of it. Lee was a freelancer, and her schedule was flexible. But by mid-fall, late arrivals had become the norm. She'd show up after 10 p.m., sometimes closer to midnight, with her hair down and a faint scent of wine. One evening, Ethan was sitting on the couch with his laptop, working on a presentation for a client. The clock showed 10:37. He sent a text to Lee. Are you there soon? She responded 10 minutes later. Yeah, stuck with a client. Soon. Ethan nodded to himself and continued working, but something uneasy was stirring in his chest. When Lee entered the loft at 11:15 am, her heels clicked loudly on the wood floor. She dropped her bag on the kitchen island and opened the refrigerator. Hey, Ethan said, closing his laptop. Long day? Oh, that's the worst word. Lee pulled out a bottle of water and took a sip. The client wanted to discuss every font. Everyone, Ethan, I was bored to death. That sounds fun, Ethan tried to smile. Is this the same project with the cover? Yeah, Lee nodded, but her answer was short. She walked into the living room and plopped down on the couch. I'm exhausted. What are you doing? The presentation, Ethan shrugged. I was wondering if we could have dinner together tomorrow. It's been a while since we've been out. Lee looked at him, her eyes narrowing slightly. Tomorrow, I think I have another meeting, but I'll check. Okay, Ethan nodded, trying not to show his disappointment. Just let me know. Lee smiled, but it was a strained smile. She turned on the TV and began flipping through the channels. Ethan watched her, trying to figure out why their conversations had become so superficial. He decided not to press. She was tired, he thought. That was normal. But evenings like this kept happening. Lee would come home late, answer evasively, and when Ethan asked where she had been, her tone would become sharp. Once, when she arrived at 11:45, Ethan couldn't stand it anymore. Lee, he said, standing at the kitchen island as she took off her coat. You're late again today. What's going on? Lee froze, then turned to him. What do you mean, what's going on? I was working, Ethan. I have clients, meetings. You know that. I know, Ethan nodded. But you're coming at midnight. I just want to know if everything's okay. It's fine, Lee crossed her arms. Are you following me? I don't have to account for every step. I'm not following. Ethan raised his hands. I'm just worried. We live together, Lee. I need to know where you are. Oh, please, Lee rolled her eyes. Don't start. I'm an adult. If I'm late, it doesn't mean I'm doing something bad. Relax. Ethan paused, feeling his words drowned out by her irritation. He nodded and went into the bedroom, not wanting to argue. But doubt was growing inside. Lee had never been this defensive before. Why was she reacting like this? To ease the tension, Ethan suggested a date. He made reservations at the Riverside Bar, a trendy spot overlooking the Chicago River. On a Friday night, they walked into the bar, which was packed with people. Wooden tables, soft lamplight, and jazz playing on the speakers created a cozy atmosphere. Lee, in a dark green dress, looked stunning. Ethan, in a black shirt and jeans, felt a surge of tenderness as he looked at her. It's a nice place, Lee said, looking around. You did well to choose it. I'm trying, Ethan smiled. I want us to go back to, well, having fun like we used to. Lee nodded, but her gaze was already slid around the bar. They sat at a table by the window, and Ethan ordered wine. While they waited, he tried to start a conversation. How's your project? He asked. The one with the cover, finished. Almost, Lee shrugged. The client is still picky, but I'll push him. And what about you? The same presentations? Yes, Ethan nodded, but we have a big pitch next week. If everything goes well, there's a bonus. Cool, Lee smiled, but her attention was drawn to the bartender who came over with their wine. He was young, with a short beard and a tattoo on his forearm. Here's your wine, he said, setting down the bottle and glasses. A good choice. Do you like red? I love it. Lee leaned a little closer, her smile growing wider. What would you recommend to go with it? How about a cheese plate? The bartender smiled back. Or, if you want something more substantial, we have steaks. Sounds tempting. Lee looked at him, adjusting her hair. And what do you like? Me? The bartender laughed. I'm more of a beer person, but I respect wine too, especially if it's drunk by someone with such taste. Lee laughed, and Ethan felt his face tighten. He cleared his throat, and the bartender, as if coming to his senses, nodded and left. Lee turned to Ethan, still smiling. Cool guy, she said, pouring wine. Yeah, Ethan nodded, trying to hide his irritation. Very friendly. Oh, Ethan, Lee rolled her eyes. He's just doing his job. Don't be like that. What? Ethan raised an eyebrow. So, unsure, Lee shrugged. He was just chatting. It's normal. Ethan paused, feeling his frustration rising. He wanted to point out that it didn't seem like just chatting, but he decided not to ruin the evening. They continued eating, but the conversation was strained. Lee talked more about her work, and Ethan responded in monosyllables. When the bartender returned to collect the empty plates, Lee smiled at him again, and Ethan saw him return her gaze. They got home around 10. Lee went to the bathroom, leaving her bag on the kitchen table. Ethan, clearing away the dishes, noticed that the bag was open. There was a piece of paper sticking out. He had no intention of rummaging through it, but the paper caught his eye. It was a receipt from the Luna Bar, a place he and Lee had never been to. The date was the day before yesterday. The time was 11:23 p.m. Ethan frowned. Lee had said she was out to dinner with a client, but the receipt was for 2 cocktails. He picked up the check, his heart beating faster. He wanted to call Lee and ask, but something stopped him. What if it meant nothing? Maybe she was with a friend. He imagined Lee rolling her eyes again, accusing him of not trusting him. Ethan put the check back, but doubt had already taken root. Lee came out of the bathroom in her pajamas, her hair damp. Why are you so gloomy? She asked, opening the refrigerator. Nothing, Ethan shook his head. Just tired. Then go to bed, Lee shrugged. I'll sit up a bit longer. I need to answer a couple of letters. It was a quiet late evening in their West Loop loft, save for the sound of the television Lee had left on in the background. Ethan sat on the couch, scrolling through work notes on his tablet, but his mind was elsewhere. The clock read 10:48, and Lee was still out. She'd texted an hour earlier, going to be late, client dinner. Ethan had texted back, okay, until what time? But there was no response. The loft was cozy, warm lamps, books on the shelves, the pillows Lee had chosen so carefully. But the coziness couldn't drown out the growing sense of unease. The last few weeks had been tense. Lee came home late, answered evasively, and when Ethan tried to talk, she became irritable. He wanted to trust her, but doubts were gathering like dust in the corners of their new home. The door clicked open at 11:12. Lee walked in, throwing her bag on the kitchen island. She was wearing a black dress and coat, her hair slightly disheveled. She looked tired, but her eyes were bright, as if she had just returned from a party rather than a business meeting. Hey, Ethan said, putting down his tablet. How was dinner? It's fine, Lee shrugged, taking off her coat. The clients, as always, want everything at once. Have you eaten anything? No, Ethan shook his head. I ate earlier. You're late today. Lee froze for a second, then turned to him. So, I have work, Ethan. You know how it is. I know, Ethan nodded, trying to keep his voice even. But you come in at midnight almost every day. I just want to understand what's going on at your place of work. There are certain norms, and it seems like they're really being violated there. Lee crossed her arms, her lips pressed together. Nothing's happening. I'm working. Why do you always make a big deal out of this? I'm not the one making this problem up. Ethan stood up from the couch, irritation bubbling up inside him. But we live together, Lee. I need to know where you are. It's okay to worry. Worried? Lee chuckled, but there was no warmth in her voice. That's not worrying, Ethan. That's control. You want me to account for every step. Control? Ethan frowned. I'm just asking where you've been. You come in late. You barely say what you're doing. I'm trying to figure it out. Oh, please, Lee rolled her eyes and walked over to the fridge, grabbing a bottle of water. I'm not your property. I have a life, a job, and clients. I'm not even your wife. I don't have to report to you. Ethan felt his patience snap. He took a step toward her. I'm not asking you to report, but you could at least tell me when you'll be back, or reply to a message. It wouldn't be that hard. Lee turned, her eyes flashing. Are you serious? Are you going to tell me how to live my life now? Maybe I should set a timer on my phone so you can be calm? Lee, stop. Ethan raised his voice. I'm not your enemy. I'm your boyfriend. We're supposed to be a team. But I feel like you're hiding something. The words hung in the air. Lee looked at him, her face hardening. Hiding? You really said that? Do you think I'm lying? What the hell am I supposed to think? Ethan threw up his hands. You come home late, you don't tell me where you've been, and when I ask, you get angry. What am I supposed to think? Lee set the bottle down on the table with a loud thud. You have to trust me, Ethan. That's what you're supposed to do. But instead, you interrogate me. It's ridiculous. These aren't interrogations, Ethan shook his head. I just want us to talk, like we used to. Remember when we could talk for hours? Yes, I remember, Lee crossed her arms. But you weren't being paranoid then. Do you really think I'm running around behind your back? Ethan paused. He wanted to talk about the check from Luna, about her flirting with the bartender, about the way she smiled at other men. But instead he said, I just want to know we're okay. Lee laughed, but it was cold. It's okay. Ethan, you see, if I wanted to, I could have any man. Any man. A celebrity, anyone. Do you even realize how many people want to be with me? But here I am, see? Ethan froze, her words hitting him like a slap. He looked at her, not believing his ears. What did you say? You heard, Lee shrugged, her tone indifferent. I could have chosen anyone, but I'm here with you. Maybe you should appreciate that instead of looking for trouble. Ethan felt his cheeks heat up. Her arrogance, her certainty that she was above him, was humiliating. Lee looked at him, her face calm, as if she hadn't just crushed his self-esteem. "Do you really think so?" he finally said, his voice quiet. "That you can take anyone, and I should be grateful?" "That's not what I meant." Lee rolled her eyes, but her tone wasn't apologetic. "I'm just saying I have a choice, and I chose you. So stop suspecting me." Ethan shook his head, feeling his insides tighten. "This isn't about choice, Lee. This is about respect. You act like I'm nobody." "Oh, don't be dramatic." Lee waved her hand. "I'm tired, Ethan. Let's end this conversation. I have to get up early tomorrow." She grabbed her bag and phone and headed for the bedroom. Ethan stood in the living room, his hands shaking. He felt small, insignificant. Her words I could have anyone played in his head like a broken record. He had always known Lee to be confident, but this was different. It was arrogance, bordering on cruelty. Ethan sat down slowly on the couch, trying to collect his thoughts. He remembered their first dates. She seemed sincere, open. Or was he only seeing what he wanted? He began to wonder how well he knew her. The Lee who charmed everyone at parties, who flirted with the bartenders, who came home at midnight, was she the same woman he had fallen in love with? His gaze fell on the coffee table where Lee's phone was. She had left it behind when she went into the bedroom. Ethan picked it up and looked at the screen. It was locked. He frowned. Lee had never had a password before. She always left her phone unlocked, and he never checked it. There was no need. But now, Ethan put the phone back and rubbed his face with his hands. He felt lost. The trust he had worked so hard to maintain was crumbling. He wanted to talk to Lee, to explain that her words had hurt him, but her indifference during their argument made it clear she didn't want to listen. She saw his concern as weakness, his questions as a threat. He stood up and went into the kitchen to get some water. The loft that had once felt like their shared home now felt foreign. Ethan glanced at the bedroom, where the light was dim. Lee was probably asleep, oblivious to how her words had hurt him. He finished his water and returned to the couch, not wanting to lie down next to her. Sitting in the dark, Ethan replayed their relationship in his head. Somewhere along the way, something had broken. The morning in Ethan's office in downtown Chicago was as gray as the sky outside. His desk was littered with papers and coffee cups, and his computer screen glowed with a half-finished report. Ethan, in a blue shirt and dark pants, sat staring at the monitor, but his mind was elsewhere. Lee's words, "I could have any man," echoed in his head, as did the image of her phone, now password protected. The receipt from the Luna bar, her late arrivals, her irritation, it all added up to a picture he didn't want to see, but couldn't ignore. Ethan rubbed his temples, trying to concentrate. His colleague, Sarah, peered into his cubicle. "Ethan, are you ready for the meeting at 2? We need to discuss the pitch for CrossFit," she said, holding up the folder. "Yes, of course," Ethan nodded, but his voice was distracted. "I will." Sarah looked at him doubtfully. "Are you okay? You look like you haven't slept." "Just a lot of work." Ethan forced a smile. "It's okay." "Okay," Sarah shrugged and walked away, but Ethan knew she was right. He hadn't slept well in a week. Every night he lay on the couch while Lee slept in their bedroom, wondering what to do. Talking to her was useless. Their last argument had shown she'd just brush him off or accuse him of being paranoid. But his doubts were growing, and one thought was nagging at him. What if she was seeing someone? Another man? Ethan opened his browser and typed in Chicago private investigator. He felt stupid, like a character in a bad movie, but his frustration outweighed his shame. He scrolled through several websites until he came across an agency called Greystone Investments. The site had a photo of a woman in her 40s with short dark hair and a serious look. Her name was Maria Velasquez, and she promised discretion and results. Ethan wrote down the number and, after a moment's hesitation, dialed it. "Greystone Investments, this is Maria," came a calm voice on the other end. "Hello," Ethan coughed, feeling his throat tighten. "My name is Ethan. I need help with a personal matter." "I understand," Maria answered evenly, without judgment. Tell me what's bothering you, and I'll see how I can help. Ethan paused, looking at the bustle of the office beyond the glass partition. It's about my girlfriend. I'm not sure, but I think she's cheating on me. I want to know the truth. Okay, said Maria. We can meet and discuss the details. When is convenient for you? Today, Ethan answered faster than he expected. After lunch, if that's okay. Let's do it at 3, Maria suggested. My office is at 245 Michigan Avenue. Bring any information that might help. Her schedule, her habits, the names of people she interacts with. Okay, Ethan nodded, though she couldn't see him. Thank you. He hung up the phone, his heart pounding. He was going to hire a detective to follow Lee. It seemed crazy, but her words, her behavior, her phone password, everything pointed to a problem in their relationship. And he needed to know if that problem was related to another man. Ethan spent the rest of the morning pretending to work. He sent a few emails, but his mind was on the upcoming meeting. He texted Lee, "What time are you coming today?" She responded half an hour later, "Late, client dinner. Don't wait up." Ethan gritted his teeth. Again, he put the phone down and tried to focus, but the image of Lee laughing with someone at the bar wouldn't go away. At 2 o'clock, he was sitting in a meeting with the team, but his contribution was minimal. Sarah was giving him worried looks, and the boss, John, asked if everything was okay. Ethan nodded, muttering something about deadlines. By 3 o'clock, he was on Michigan Avenue, standing in front of a glass door with a sign that read, Greystone Investments. He took a deep breath and walked in. Maria's office was small but neat. A wooden desk, a couple of chairs, a filing cabinet. There was a certificate hanging on the wall, and on the desk was a framed photograph of Maria and 2 teenagers. Maria herself was shorter than Ethan expected, but her confident posture and direct gaze inspired confidence. She wore a dark blue jacket and a white shirt. "Ethan," she extended her hand. "Maria Velasquez, sit down." "Thank you." Ethan shook her hand and sat down. His palms were damp, and he wiped them on his pants. "Tell me what's going on." Maria opened her notebook and picked up a pen. "The more details, the better." Ethan cleared his throat, feeling awkward. "My girlfriend, Lee. We've been living together for a couple of months now. But she started coming home late, sometimes at midnight. She says it's work, she's a designer, a freelancer. But her excuses, they're kind of vague. Dinner with a client, traffic jams. And she gets mad when I ask." Maria nodded, taking notes. "Continue." "We had a fight a week ago." Ethan rubbed his neck. "She said she could have any man she wanted, even a celebrity. It was cruel, and I found a receipt from a bar we'd never been to, late at night, and her phone now has a password, whereas before it didn't." "I see." Maria looked at him. "Do you think she's dating someone?" Ethan paused, then nodded. "Yes, I don't want to believe it, but I don't know what else to think. I need to know if there's another man." "Okay." Maria put her pen down. "I can do surveillance. It usually takes a week or 2, depending on her schedule. I'll watch her, take pictures if I see anything. You'll get a report with evidence, if there is any." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. "What if there's nothing?" "Then you'll know," Maria shrugged. "Sometimes the truth is the absence of news. But if there is something, I'll find it." "Is this confidential?" Ethan asked. "She can't know." "Absolutely," Maria nodded. "No one but you will see the report. I've been working like this for 15 years. You don't have to worry." Ethan nodded, but his inner conflict remained. He wanted to trust Lee. He wanted to believe that she was just busy, that her words were just bragging, that the check was a misunderstanding. But the fear of being deceived was stronger. He couldn't live with the what if. He needed the truth, even if it broke his heart. "How much does it cost?" he asked. Maria named a figure, $200 a day, a week minimum. Ethan blinked, but nodded. He could afford it, even if it meant cutting back on expenses for a couple of months. "Okay," he said. "I'm in." Maria pulled out a contract and explained the terms, the time frame, the methods, the confidentiality. Ethan listened, but his thoughts were on Lee. He imagined her laughing with someone at a bar, her arms around another man. His stomach clenched. He picked up a pen and signed the contract without hesitation. The problem in their relationship was obvious, and he needed to know if she was involved with another man. Great, Maria put the contract away. Give me her details, name, photo, schedule, places she goes. The more, the better. Ethan pulled out his phone and texted Maria a photo of Lee taken at the party. He included her full name, Lee Clark, and a rough schedule. She often worked from home, but spent her evenings with clients at restaurants or bars. He mentioned a bar called Luna and said that Lee often took Uber. Okay, Maria nodded. I'll start tomorrow. You'll get updates, but the full report will be in a week. If it's urgent, I'll call. Thank you. Ethan stood up, feeling both lighter and heavier. I hope I'm wrong. I understand. Maria looked at him with sympathy. But it's better to know than to guess. Ethan walked out of the office, the cold Chicago air hitting his face. He walked to his car, replaying the conversation. He had just hired someone to spy on his girlfriend. It was wrong, but he saw no other way out. Lee had left him with too many questions and too few answers. Back at the office, he tried to work, but his concentration was gone. He missed a deadline on one report, and Sarah asked again if everything was okay. Ethan waved it off, but his thoughts were on Maria, on Lee, on what he might learn. He returned to the loft that evening. Lee was home, a rarity. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. Hey, Ethan said, taking off his coat. You're early. Yeah, Lee nodded, not looking up from the screen. Dinner's canceled. How are you? Fine, Ethan shrugged, avoiding her gaze. Tired. Then rest, Lee smiled, but her tone was cool. Ethan had spent the last week in agony, torn between hope and fear. Fear not because he was a coward, but because he was humanly afraid of experiencing what his mind was telling him. He had hired Maria Velasquez, a private investigator, to wait for the truth about Lee, but each day without news only made him more anxious. Lee kept coming home late, citing clients, and her coldness in their conversations was becoming unbearable. Ethan barely slept, his thoughts swirling around questions. What was she hiding? Was there someone else? On Friday morning, sitting in his office in downtown Chicago, Ethan received a text from Maria. Report is ready. Be there at 3 p.m. His stomach clenched. He replied, I will, and the next hours passed in excruciating anticipation. He was a zombie at work. He spilled coffee on paper, forgot to respond to an important email, and when a colleague asked what was wrong, he muttered, everything is fine. But nothing was fine. By 3 o'clock, Ethan was standing outside the offices of Greystone Investments on Michigan Avenue. A cold wind cut through his coat, but he barely noticed. Inside, Maria was waiting for him, seated at a desk in a small office. Her navy blue jacket was buttoned, her face expressionless. On the desk was a gray folder and a white envelope. Ethan, sit down, she said, gesturing to a chair. Her voice was even, but there was a weight to it. I've gathered the information you asked for, but I'll warn you, it may not be easy. Ethan sat up, his hands clenched into fists. Just tell me what you found. Maria nodded and opened the folder. I followed Lee for 6 days. She did meet with clients 2 dinners at restaurants, both with women from the publishing house. But there were other meetings unrelated to work. Ethan felt his blood run cold. What meetings? Maria pushed the envelope closer. These are the photographs. They were taken Wednesday and Thursday in the Lincoln Park area. Lee visited the apartment of a man named Nick Holt. He works as a marketer at Blaze Media. I saw them together 3 times. Ethan stared at the envelope, hesitant to take it. His heart was pounding so loudly he could hear it in his ears. What were they doing? You'd better see for yourself, Maria sighed. I took pictures through the window of his apartment. They're clear. Ethan opened the envelope and pulled out the photographs. The first showed Lee walking into an apartment building. She was wearing a black jacket, her hair down, and a smile. Walking next to her was a man tall with short blonde hair and a gray coat. Ethan didn't recognize him, but the name Nick was already cutting like a blade. The next picture was worse. Lee and Nick were standing in the living room of their apartment, the light from the lamp illuminating their faces. They were hugging, her arms around his neck, his hands on her hips. Ethan gritted his teeth, but he took the last picture and his world came crashing down. In the picture, Lee and Nick were kissing, their bodies pressed together, her fingers tangled in his hair, his hands slid under her sweater. The picture had been taken through the glass balcony door, up close, and every detail was painfully clear. Her half-closed eyes, his tilted head, their lips locked in a passionate kiss. Ethan froze, his breath caught in his throat. Tears stung his eyes, but he didn't let them fall. He stared at the picture, feeling something inside him break. His Lee, kissing another man, in someone else's apartment, while he waited for her at home, believing her lies. The trust he had clung to like a life preserver had shattered into pieces. "When was this?" he asked, his voice hoarse, almost alien. "Wednesday, around 9 o'clock, Maria answered, and Thursday, closer to 10. She was there for 2 or 3 hours each time." Ethan nodded, not taking his eyes off the photograph. He turned it over, as if hoping there would be another image on the back, but it was empty. He threw the pictures on the table and clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. "Anything else?" he asked, looking at Maria. "Not yet," she shook her head. "I can continue if you like, or find out more about Holt." Ethan shook his head. "No need. This is enough." Maria looked at him sympathetically, but said nothing. She put the photographs back in the envelope and pushed it toward him along with the report. "This is yours. I'll send the bill later. If you need to talk, call." Ethan took the envelope, his movements mechanical. "Thank you," he muttered, and stood up. He walked out of the office without looking back and walked down to his car. The cold Chicago air hit his face, but he didn't feel it. He got behind the wheel, threw the envelope on the passenger seat, and started the engine. He didn't know where to go. Ethan drove through the city, oblivious to the streets. Skyscrapers, traffic lights, pedestrians, all merged into a gray mass. His hands gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. Anger rose like a storm, drowning out the pain. He wanted to scream, but instead he clenched his teeth, feeling his jaw ache. "Damn it, Lee," he hissed, slamming his palm down on the steering wheel. "How could you?" He remembered her smile when she talked about work, her irritation when he asked where she was, her boast, "I could have anyone." Now he saw that those were not empty words. She had chosen Nick. Kissed him, hugged him, while Ethan waited for her at home like an idiot. Ethan pulled into a parking lot by the river, not knowing how he had gotten there. He turned off the engine and grabbed the envelope. With trembling hands, he pulled out the photograph of the kiss. Lee and Nick, their faces, their bodies, it was all real, unbearably real. A tear rolled down his cheek, and he wiped it away furiously. He didn't want to cry. He wanted to be angry, he wanted to hate her, but the pain was too much. "She lied," he whispered, looking at the picture. "She lied all the time." He dropped the photo on the seat and leaned back, closing his eyes. His chest tightened as if someone was squeezing the air out of him. He thought about how to tell her. Show her the pictures, or just leave. He imagined her face. Would she deny it? Laugh? Or tell him again that he should be grateful? Ethan started the car again and drove, aimlessly, just to drive past their loft, but didn't stop. He couldn't see Lee now. He couldn't pretend everything was okay. His phone vibrated, a text from her. "I'll be late, don't wait up." He didn't answer. Anger rose like fire, but underneath it, vulnerability smoldered. Ethan felt crushed, unwanted. He had given Lee everything: his time, his heart, his home, and she had chosen someone else. He pulled up on an empty street, parked, and slammed his fist on the steering wheel, once, twice, 3 times. "Damn," escaped in a whisper. "Damn, Louder. Damn. So that the entire empty block could hear, and nothing changed. Beneath the anger, there was that piercing feeling that men rarely talk about out loud, helplessness. As if all your meaning had been picked out and erased from you. He lowered his head to the steering wheel, listened to the pounding of blood in his ears, and allowed himself the luxury of weakness. Another breath, heavy, salty. Then he straightened up, started the car, and drove on. Ethan spent the day after meeting Maria in his car, driving around Chicago until the streets went dark. The photos of Lee and Nick making out in his apartment sat in an envelope on the passenger seat like a ticking time bomb. He pulled into a burger joint, wolfed down a burger without tasting it, and sat there until Lee texted him, "Where are you?" "I'm home." It was 10:23 p.m. Ethan clutched his phone. It was time. He pulled into their West Loop loft around 11 and the lights were on, and Ethan knew Lee was inside. He picked up the envelope with the photos, took a deep breath, and walked in. The inside smelled of the vanilla candle Lee liked to light. She was sitting on the living room couch, wearing black leggings and an oversized sweater, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when she saw Ethan. "Where have you been?" she asked, her tone more irritated than concerned. "I wrote to you." "I did," Ethan said shortly, tossing his keys onto the kitchen island. His voice was tense, but he was trying to keep his cool. The envelope in his hand felt like a brick. Lee squinted, putting her phone down. "What's wrong with you? You look like someone died." Ethan looked at her, his heart pounding. He wanted to scream, but instead he pulled the photographs out of the envelope and threw them on the coffee table in front of her. The pictures scattered, Lee and Nick, hugging, kissing, their faces clear in the lamplight. Lee glanced at the photos, her face frozen for a second. But then she leaned back on the couch, crossing her arms. "Seriously, Ethan, you hired someone to follow me?" "Don't change the subject." Ethan stepped closer, his fists clenching. "Don't you want to explain?" Lee sighed, as if he were a child asking a stupid question. "Okay, yeah, that's me. So what?" Ethan froze, her words like a slap in the face. He expected denial, excuses, maybe tears. But not this. "You cheated on me, and you don't care." "I cheated," Lee shrugged, her tone icy. "It doesn't mean I don't love you. Nick is just entertainment. You take everything too seriously." "Entertainment?" Ethan raised his voice, his face turning red. "You lied to me, Lee, every damn night." Lee rolled her eyes, standing up from the couch. "Oh, don't be dramatic. You knew who I was when we started. I'm not one to sit still. Men want me, Ethan. I could be with anyone, but I'm with you. Maybe you should be grateful." Ethan felt the blood rush to his head. Her arrogance, her indifference were tearing him apart. "Grateful," he almost screamed. "You cheated on me, and I'm supposed to thank you. Are you serious?" "Yeah, seriously." Lee took a step toward him, her eyes flashing. "Look at you, Ethan. You're an average guy. A nice guy, but average. And me? I can snap my fingers and have anyone. You'll never find anyone better than me. Ever." Her words hung in the air, cold and sharp as a blade. Ethan looked at her, his chest heaving, his eyes blazing with anger. This wasn't just a blow to his self-esteem. It was the destruction of everything he'd ever seen in her. The woman he loved stood before him, her true nature selfish, cruel revealed in full. "You're wrong," he said, his voice low but firm. "I'll find someone better, because anyone will be better than you." Lee laughed, but it was empty. "Oh, please. Good luck, Ethan." He didn't answer. Her words no longer hurt. They fueled his resolve. Ethan turned, walked into the bedroom, and grabbed a duffel bag from the closet. He began to stuff it with clothes, t-shirts, jeans, a phone charger. His movements were quick, mechanical, fueled by anger. "What are you doing?" Lee appeared in the doorway, her voice losing some of its confidence. "I'm leaving." Ethan didn't look at her as he zipped up his bag. "We're done." "Seriously?" Lee crossed her arms. "You're just going to run away? Like that?" What do you expect me to do, beg you to fall on my knees so that you can be with me? No, let this jewel go to someone else. Ethan turned to her. His eyes were cold. I will not stay with someone who does not respect me. You made your choice, Lee. Live with him. He slung his bag over his shoulder and walked past her toward the door. Lee grabbed his arm. Ethan, wait. You can't just leave. This is our home. Ethan pulled his hand away. He opened the door and walked out without looking back. Lee called something after him, but he didn't listen. The elevator took him down, and the cold night air hit him in the face. Ethan threw his bag in the trunk of his car and got behind the wheel. His hands were shaking, but not from the pain, was from adrenaline. He was angry, crushed, but for the first time in weeks, he felt like he was in control of his life again. Ethan pulled out his phone and booked a room at the Hilton downtown. He didn't want to go back to his friends or his old apartment. He wanted solitude. When he got to the hotel, he checked in, dropped his bag on the floor, and collapsed on the bed. The silence was deafening. 6 months had passed since the night Ethan slammed the loft door, leaving Lee and her betrayal behind. Now he stood in his new apartment in Logan Square, Chicago, a small one-room apartment with white walls, creaky floors, and a window onto a noisy street. The furniture was simple: an IKEA sofa, a wooden table, 2 chairs, and a shelf of books. Ethan didn't need a palace, he needed a place where he could breathe freely without the memories of the past. The apartment had become his post-breakup sanctuary. The loft he and Lee had shared was history. They'd broken their lease, and Ethan had taken his things with her, exchanging only a few cold words. The last thing he'd heard from her was a sarcastic good luck as he carried out boxes. Now, in Logan Square, he was rebuilding his life, one step at a time. Ethan started Saturday morning brewing coffee in the small kitchen. His phone on the table played a podcast about marketing trends. Work had become his anchor. He'd been drowning in projects since the breakup, and his efforts had paid off. A promotion to senior manager had brought more challenges and a distraction from the past. He poured coffee into a mug with his company logo and checked his email. Today, he was going to meet Tom and Emily, the friends he'd almost lost during his relationship with Lee. Ethan pulled on jeans and a gray sweatshirt and headed out. Logan Square was bustling with conversations from the coffee shops, kids racing on scooters, and a street guitarist strumming Bob Dylan. The Old Town pub, where he had arranged to meet, was a 10-minute walk away. Tom and Emily were already seated at a table, pints of beer and a bowl of nachos in front of them. Finally, Tom raised his hand, grinning. I thought you were going to drown in your tables again. Not this time. Ethan sat up, smiling. What do you have? Nothing new, Emily shrugged, taking a bite of a chip. Tom's still fighting with the boss, and I'm trying to teach the kids fractions. What about you? How's the apartment? Getting used to it, Ethan nodded, ordering an IPA from the waiter. Smaller than the loft, but I'm okay with it. Quiet. That's the main thing. Tom took a sip of beer. Listen, it's like you've come back to life. Good to see you, man. Likewise, Ethan smiled. Sorry I disappeared. It was tough. Emily looked at him, her eyes softening. We know. Lee was mean. But you're coping. It's clear. I try, Ethan shrugged. Let's move on. They chatted about small things. Tom's stupid clients, Emily's school jokes, the new bar in the neighborhood. Ethan felt the tension drain away. They weren't asking questions, which was good. After the second beer, Tom poked him in the shoulder. We're having a barbecue next Saturday, he said. No excuses. It'll be like old times. Agreed, Ethan nodded. I'll come. He returned home with a lightness in his chest. Reuniting with his friends was like a breath of air after a long dive. After the breakup, he had isolated himself from everyone, but now he realized that was a mistake. The people who valued him were there, and he was not going to lose them again. That evening, Ethan sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He came across an old text from Lee. Where are you? From the night everything had fallen apart. His finger froze, but he quickly deleted the message. Then he opened his gallery. There were still photos of her. Lee at a party, Lee in the park, Lee with a glass of wine. He looked at them without pain, only with weariness. They were an anchor he no longer wanted to drag. To get his bearings, Ethan began seeing a therapist. Dr. Linda Crow, a woman in her 50s with short gray hair, met him every 2 weeks in a cozy office lined with bookshelves. On their last session, Wednesday, she sat across from him, holding a mug of tea. "Ethan, how are you this week?" Linda asked, her voice calm. "Not bad," Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Met up with friends. Work is going well. Feeling fine." "That's progress," Linda nodded. "You said work helps. And outside the office, what keeps you busy?" "Friends," Ethan shrugged. "Pubs, barbecues, trying to live life like before. No drama." "Okay," Linda smiled. "What about Lee? Are you thinking about her?" Ethan chuckled, crossing his arms. "Sometimes, but not like before. She tried to get into my head, told me I was nothing, that I'd never find someone better. But I don't care. It's her problem, not mine." Linda raised an eyebrow. "Don't care? That's a big step. Her words were hurting you just a little while ago." "They did," Ethan nodded, "but I don't buy it anymore. She wanted me to feel less than I am, and I'm not less. I'm building my own life, and she has nothing to do with it." "It's powerful, Ethan," Linda leaned forward. "You're taking your power back. What helps you feel that way?" "Our work," he said. "Friends. And, I don't know, just time. I see that I can do without her, and I'm not going to prove anything to her. She's not worth it." "Exactly," Linda nodded. "You focus on yourself. That's healing." The session gave Ethan clarity. He wasn't completely free of the past. Sometimes Lee's words would pop into his head, but they no longer stuck. He didn't feel ashamed or insecure. Instead, he felt in control of his life. Ethan stood in front of the mirror in his Logan Square apartment, adjusting the collar of his navy shirt. His suitcase, packed for a trip to New York, lay by the door. Today was his 10-year college reunion, and for the first time in a long time, he felt excited. It had been more than 6 months since his breakup with Lee, and he was finally starting to feel like himself, not crushed by betrayal, but ready for new chapters. Work, friends, and therapy had helped him get back on his feet, but he had avoided dating. Today's trip was a chance to remember who he had been before all this. He flew into New York on Friday afternoon, and a cab dropped him off at the Westgate Hotel, a trendy spot in Midtown Manhattan. The lobby was gleaming with marble and crystal chandeliers, and the front desk was already crowded with people wearing badges that read, "Class of 2015." Ethan picked up his badge, pinned it to his jacket, and headed into the ballroom where the party was taking place. The room was filled with familiar and unfamiliar faces. Tables with white tablecloths were laden with appetizers, bartenders were pouring cocktails, and aughts pop music was playing on the speakers, making everyone smile. Ethan looked around, feeling a little awkward. He hadn't been to a gathering like this in years, and the thought of talking to people he hadn't seen in a decade was a little daunting. "Ethan," a voice called out, and he turned. Jake, his old friend from the marketing class, was walking toward him, his hair now slightly gray. "Dude, how old?" "Jake," Ethan smiled, shaking his hand. "You look like you just took your finals yesterday." "Yes, just with a mortgage and 2 kids," Jake laughed. "What about you? Still in Chicago?" "Yeah," Ethan nodded. "I work in marketing, live in Logan Square. What about you?" "Brooklyn," Jake said, sipping his beer. "Open my own coffee shop. Come over and get you a latte." "Deal," Ethan smiled. "Who else is here?" "Half of our course," Jake waved his hand. "Let's go find the rest." They walked toward a group at the bar, where Ethan recognized a few faces. Lisa, who was studying journalism, and Mike, the former captain of the basketball team. The conversations swirled around old stories, dorm parties, professors, arguments in seminars. Ethan relaxed, feeling the warmth of nostalgia. These people had known him when he was young and full of ideas, and their laughter reminded him that that part of him was still there. "Remember when we hid the piragua in Professor Crow's office?" Lisa said, giggling. "He spent a week looking for who did it." "It was Ethan's idea," Mike nudged him with his elbow. "You were always the brains behind our shenanigans." "Sorry," Ethan raised his hands, smiling, "but it was worth it." An hour later, as the group dispersed for drinks, Ethan noticed a woman at the refreshment table. She was wearing a green dress with short brown hair and a bright smile. He didn't recognize her, but she caught his eye and came over. "Ethan, right?" she said, holding out her hand. "Jenna, I'm a friend of Sarah's from photography class." "Hi, Jenna," Ethan shook her hand. "Nice to meet you. Did you go to school with us?" "Not really," Jenna smiled. "I was a year younger, but I hung out with your class. Sarah talked a lot about you." "Sarah?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Sarah Kings. How is she?" "Oh, she's fine." Jenna pulled out her phone. "She lives in Los Angeles, works as a photographer. Her pictures are just awesome. Want to see them?" Ethan nodded, intrigued. He vaguely remembered Sarah, the quiet girl with the camera who was always at parties but rarely spoke. Jenna opened Instagram and pulled up Sarah's profile. The screen is filled with photos: ocean sunsets, musicians, black and white cityscapes. Each image was alive, full of emotion. "Wow," Ethan said, flipping through. "She's talented." "Of course," Jenna grinned. "She just had a gallery show. But you know, she was always a little shy, especially with you." "With me?" Ethan looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" Jenna rolled her eyes, but her tone was playful. "Oh, come on. Sarah had a crush on you in college. Always told me how smart you were, how funny you were. She still asks about you when we talk." Ethan froze, his eyebrows rising. "Seriously? I didn't even know." "Sure," Jenna shrugged, as if it were obvious. "She was too shy to tell me, but she liked you, and between you and me, she still wants to know how you're doing." Ethan felt something stir inside him, a mixture of surprise and curiosity. He'd never thought of Sarah as anything more than an acquaintance, but now the image of her, the girl with the camera, taking pictures like this, was more vivid. He scrolled through her Instagram, lingering on a photo of Sarah standing on a beach, her hair blowing in the wind. She was beautiful without being flashy, with a warm smile that seemed genuine. "Are these her latest works?" he asked, handing the phone back. "Yeah," Jenna nodded. "She shoots for magazines, travels. If you want, I can give her contact information. She'll be thrilled." Ethan paused, his fingers tapping against his glass. Since Lee, he had avoided thinking about another relationship. Her words, "you'll never find someone better," had long since lost their power, but he was still wary. And yet, something about Sarah, about her photos, about this news from Jenna, had ignited a spark. "Maybe later," he said, smiling. "But, thank you. This is unexpected." "No problem," Jenna winked. "Just think about it. Sarah's gold." She went off to join another group, and Ethan stayed at the bar, sipping his wine. He thought about Sarah, about college, about how he hadn't noticed her feelings for him. He'd been too busy partying, studying, and having his first relationship. Looking back now, he felt a little nostalgic for that time and hoped that maybe something good was yet to come. As the party went on, Ethan chatted with other classmates, laughed at old jokes, and exchanged business cards. But deep down, he couldn't get Sarah out of his head. Her photos were like windows into another world, a world he wanted to know. He pulled out his phone, found her profile, and scrolled through again. One photo, a black and white portrait of an old man with a wrinkled face, made him stop. The caption read, "Stories in the Eyes." Ethan smiled. He wondered what stories Sarah herself held. By midnight, the party was winding down. Ethan said goodbye to Jake and Lisa, promising to keep in touch, and returned to his room. He lay down on his bed, still holding his phone. Sarah's profile was open, his finger hovering over the comment button. Ethan sat on the couch in his small Logan Square apartment, lit by a soft lamp. Outside, Chicago was humming with the evening noise of cars honking and music playing. His phone was on the coffee table, open to Sarah Kings's Instagram account. It had been a week since their high school reunion in New York City, but Jenna's words, "Sarah had a crush on you in college," were still in his head. He flipped through her photos, portraits, landscapes, travel moments. Each image was vivid, as if Sarah saw the world differently than everyone else. Ethan hesitated. After Lee, he'd avoided intimacy, afraid of getting burned again. But Sarah, with her warm smile in the beach photo, seemed different, sincere, open. Jenna had mentioned that Sarah was still interested in him. Maybe he should give it a try. His finger hovered over the text button. He took a deep breath and typed, "Hi, Sarah, it's Ethan from college. I was at a reunion and Jenna showed me your work. It's cool. How are you?" He sent the message and put the phone down, feeling his heart pound. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Ethan was beginning to wonder if he'd texted her for nothing when his phone vibrated. Sarah responded, "Ethan, wow, how old? Thanks for the compliment. I'm in LA shooting for a magazine. What about you? Jenna said you were in Chicago." Ethan smiled, relieved. He wrote, "Yeah, Chicago, working in marketing. Your photos are amazing. How did you get into photography?" The response came quickly, and the conversation began. Sarah told him about working as a photographer's assistant after college, traveling in South America, and now shooting for fashion magazines. Ethan shared stories about his job, about life in Logan Square. Their messages were light, full of jokes, as if they hadn't been silent for 10 years. A few days later, Sarah wrote, "Hey, it's cool to text, but maybe we can call. I'm free tomorrow night." Ethan agreed, although he felt nervous. He hadn't done anything like this since he and Lee broke up. But Sarah seemed different, no arrogance, no games. The next evening, Ethan settled into his couch with his laptop and Zoom. He fixed his hair, checked the lighting, and hit join. Sarah appeared on the screen, sitting in a bright room with large windows. Her brown hair was pulled back into a loose bun, and she was holding a mug of tea. Her smile was as warm as in the photo. "Ethan," she said, waving her hand, "you look like you just ran away from a lecture." "Yeah," Ethan laughed, relaxing. "And you look like you're shooting the cover of Vogue. Is this your office?" "This is my apartment." Sarah turned to her laptop, revealing shelves of books and cameras. "My office is anywhere there's light. What do you have there?" Ethan showed me his small living room. "This is my palace. It's not Los Angeles, but I like it." "Cool," Sarah nodded. "Logan Square is a hipster paradise, right? Coffee shops, graffiti?" "Right," Ethan smiled. "And you have Los Angeles. Beaches, celebrities." "Beaches, yeah," Sarah shrugged. "Celebrities, well, I've photographed a couple of musicians. But they're just regular people, just with big egos." They chatted for an hour, jumping from topic to topic. Sarah told them about a trip to Peru, where she photographed local artisans. Her eyes lit up as she described a market in Cusco, full of colors and smells. "I almost missed my flight," she said, laughing. "I was stuck at the market buying a llama blanket. Do you travel?" "Not so great," Ethan shook his head. "I was in Mexico a couple years ago. Beach, tacos, all that. But your Peru sounds like an adventure." "It was worth it," Sarah smiled. "If you go, tell me, I'll give you my contact information." Ethan noticed how easy it was to talk to her. She wasn't bragging, not trying to impress, just sharing stories. He told her about his latest project at work, how his team had won a big contract. "This is so cool." Sarah leaned closer to the camera. "You're probably the big boss now." "Not exactly," Ethan chuckled. "But they pour my coffee faster now." Sarah laughed, and her laughter, clear, genuine, filled the room. Ethan felt a warmth in his chest. In that moment, looking at her smile, at the dimples in her cheeks, he realized that he was falling in love. It was not a loud revelation, but a quiet realization, like a puzzle coming together. He was not ready for this, but he did not want to resist. They spoke several more times over the next few weeks, each call longer than the last. sometimes lasting until midnight. Sarah showed off her latest photos, portraits of homeless people in Los Angeles, taken for a charity project. Ethan shared stories about Chicago, barbecues at Tom's, his new hobby of podcasting. Their humor matched. They joked about old memes, argued about which movie was better, Inception or The Prestige. One day, during yet another call, Sarah was sitting on the balcony of her apartment, the sunset visible behind her. She was talking about her latest project, a photo shoot for a travel magazine. "They wanted me to film the jungle in Costa Rica," she said, "but I was stuck in traffic for 3 hours. I had to film the monkeys from the car." "Really?" Ethan laughed. "So, did the monkeys pose?" "You bet," Sarah grinned. "One even stole my lens. I thought it was the end of my career." Ethan laughed as he imagined the scene. "You should put that in your portfolio. Shot at Monkey Point." Sarah laughed again, covering her mouth with her hand. Her eyes were shining, and Ethan felt his heart tighten. This laughter, this lightness, he hadn't felt anything like it since everything had started with Lee, and even then it had been different. Sarah was real, without masks. He wanted to say something, to express what he felt, but instead he asked, "When are you next in Chicago? Or should I fly to Los Angeles myself?" Sarah raised an eyebrow, her smile turning sly. "Wow, Ethan, is that what you're implying? Maybe I should fly out. I have a project in New York in a month. I could drop by." "I'm serious," Ethan smiled. "Chicago isn't Los Angeles, but I know a couple of places." "Then keep your word," Sarah winked, "but only if you show me the best pizza." "Deal," Ethan nodded, feeling the warmth growing inside him. They talked for another half-hour until Sarah said she had to go to filming. "Call me tomorrow?" she asked. "Of course," Ethan nodded. "Don't disappear." "I won't disappear," Sarah waved her hand and hung up. Ethan closed his laptop and leaned back on the couch. His apartment was quiet, but the silence wasn't empty. He thought about Sarah, her laughter, the way she told stories, the way their conversations flowed. For the first time in a year, he allowed himself to be vulnerable. After Lee, he'd been afraid to open up, but with Sarah, it felt natural. She wasn't playing around, she wasn't manipulative. She was herself, and that was appealing. Ethan stood up to get himself some water and looked at his phone. The wallpaper was a photo of Lake Michigan he'd taken last summer. He thought maybe a photo of Sarah would be there soon. He was in no rush. He knew it would take time. But the spark he'd lit in New York was growing, and he was ready to see where it would lead. Ethan stepped out of the lax terminal, squinting into the bright sun. The warm air smelled of salt and asphalt, and the palm trees swayed along the road. His backpack was slung over his shoulder, and his chest was pounding with anticipation. After weeks of texting and video calling Sarah, he was finally flying to LA to meet her. Their virtual connection had been easy, full of laughter and warmth, but now he was about to see what it would be like in person. He was ready, not without nerves, but with a hope he hadn't felt in a long time. Sarah wrote, "I'm in the studio finishing up some editing. Come to 1123 Wilshire. Can't wait." Ethan called an Uber, and half an hour later, he was standing in front of a modern building with large windows. Inside, Sarah's studio was chaotic but vibrant. The walls were covered with photographs, the tables were piled high with cameras and laptops, and soft indie music played in the corner. Sarah, in jeans and a white t-shirt, stood at a monitor, scrolling through the images. "Ethan," she turned, her face lighting up with a smile. She ran up and hugged him, her hair smelling of lavender. "You made it. How was the flight?" "It's fine," Ethan smiled, hugging her back. "You're in the eye of a hurricane here. Is this your studio?" "Yeah," Sarah nodded, looking around. "My organized chaos. Want to see what I'm working on?" She led him to a monitor where photographs for a gallery show were open portraits of Los Angeles street artists. Each image was vivid, with emotion that caught his attention. "It's incredible," Ethan said, flipping through them. "It's like you're catching their souls." "Thank you," Sarah smiled, adjusting her hair. "I try to see people as they are." "Well, enough work." Shall we go for a walk? They went outside, and Sarah led him around the city. Los Angeles was bustling, full of life. Sidewalk cafes, graffiti on the walls, skaters on the sidewalks. They stopped at a coffee shop in Silver Lake, where Sarah ordered an iced latte and Ethan ordered a black coffee. "How's LA?" she asked, stirring her drink. "Not too wild after Chicago?" "It's dynamic," Ethan shrugged, "but I like it, especially with a guide like this." "Oh, I'm the best guide," Sarah winked. "I'll also show you a real taco place. Chicago pizza is smoking nervously." "It's a challenge," Ethan laughed, "but I'm willing to try." They chatted as they walked along Sunset Boulevard, where the neon signs were just beginning to light up. Sarah was talking about her last trip to Mexico, where she had photographed a festival. Her eyes sparkled as she described the dancing and fireworks. "I almost forgot to turn the camera on," she said, laughing. "I just stood there and watched like a kid." "That's cool," Ethan smiled. "You live in these moments. I'm jealous." "And you?" Sarah looked at him. "What makes you glow, besides marketing?" Ethan thought about it. "I would have said work before, but now, I don't know, friends, new places. Maybe you," he added with a slight smile. Sarah blushed, but her gaze was warm. "Smooth going, Ethan, but I like it." They reached the taco stand, a small food truck with a long line. Sarah ordered shrimp tacos and Ethan ordered beef tacos. They sat on plastic chairs, eating and laughing as sauce dripped onto the table. "You were right," Ethan said, wiping his hands. "This is better than pizza." "I told you," Sarah smirked. "Chicago, get ready, I'm coming for revenge." That evening, Sarah suggested going to the Griffith Observatory. "It has the best view of the city," she said. "And the stars. You don't mind, do you?" "Sounds perfect," Ethan nodded. They took Sarah's car, an old Jeep, and drove up the winding roads into the hills. The observatory was lit by a soft glow, and the city below sparkled with a million lights. They walked out onto the observation deck, where the air was cool and the sky was full of stars. Sarah leaned against the railing, looking out at the horizon. "I love this place," she said. "It reminds me that the world is bigger than it seems." Ethan stood next to her, feeling her closeness warm him. "Do you come here often?" "When you need to think," Sarah turned to him. "You know, I've been thinking about you. For a long time." Ethan looked at her, his eyebrows raised. "Really? Jenna mentioned it, but—" "Jenna spilled the beans, didn't she?" Sarah rolled her eyes, but smiled. "I had a crush on you in college. You were so smart, funny. I wanted to tell you, but I was too shy. Then I regretted it." Ethan felt a warmth in his chest. "I didn't even notice. I was too busy. I don't know, partying, studying." "I understand," Sarah nodded. "But now you're here, and I'm glad." "Me too." Ethan looked into her eyes. "You're not like the others, Sarah. You're real." She smiled, her cheeks slightly pink. "You too, Ethan. I didn't think this would happen, but I feel something. With you." Ethan stepped closer, his heart beating faster. "Me too. Since that first call. Your laugh, it got to me." Sarah laughed softly, the same sound she'd heard on their video calls, clear and real. She looked up at him, her eyes glittering under the stars. Ethan leaned in, and she didn't pull away. Their lips met in a soft but firm kiss. Her hands touched his shoulders, his waist. The city below sparkled, but for them there were only the stars and this moment. The kiss lasted a few seconds, but it cemented their connection like a promise. They pulled away, smiling. "That was good," Sarah said, smoothing her hair. "Better than good," Ethan chuckled. "Worth flying across the country." "Of course," Sarah nudged him with her elbow. "But you owe me coffee for this." "Deal," Ethan took her hand, their fingers intertwined. They stayed on the set for another half hour, chatting about small things, but their closeness spoke louder than words. Sarah told him about her plans and exhibition, a trip to Japan. Ethan shared his dream of starting his own agency. Their conversations were as light as they had been on Zoom, but now they were real, tangible. When they got back to the car, Sarah looked at him. "You're staying for a couple of days, huh?" "Yeah," Ethan nodded. "I want to see more. And you?" "Then tomorrow is Venice Beach," Sarah smiled. "And maybe one more kiss." "I'm all for it," Ethan laughed, feeling his heart fill. They drove to her apartment, where Ethan had left his backpack. He was staying at a hotel nearby, but Sarah insisted he come in for tea. They sat on her balcony, drinking mint tea and looking out at the lights of Los Angeles. Ethan thought about Lee, not with pain, but with gratitude that her deception had brought him here to Sarah. Her sincerity, her laughter, her warmth were everything he had missed in the past. "What are you thinking about?" Sarah asked, noticing his gaze. "About how lucky I am," Ethan smiled. "You're the best thing that's happened to me in a long time." Sarah Knack leaned forward and kissed him again, briefly but tenderly. "You too, Ethan. Let's go to bed. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." He left for the hotel feeling alive. Sarah wasn't just a new chapter, she was the promise of something real, and he was ready to take it. Ethan woke up in his room at the Los Angeles Hilton feeling a lightness he hadn't felt in months. His trip to see Sarah the day before had already rocked his world. Their walks around town, dinner at a taco place, and kiss under the stars at the Griffith Observatory were like scenes from a movie where he was finally the main character, not an extra. Sarah, with her genuine smile and infectious laugh, was everything he hadn't found in Lee, and it filled him with confidence. That morning, he met Sarah at her West Side apartment. Hers was a bright place, with large windows that let in sunlight and walls covered with photographs of her. Mexican markets, New York streets, portraits of strangers. A bowl of oranges sat on the kitchen table, and Fleetwood Mac played softly on the speakers. Sarah, wearing shorts and a white t-shirt, was making coffee. "Good morning," she said, smiling as Ethan walked in. "Ready for Venice Beach?" "Absolutely," Ethan said, setting his backpack by the door. "But first, coffee. Smells like heaven." "Only the best for our guests from Chicago," Sarah winked as she poured him a mug. "With milk?" "Black." Ethan took the mug, their fingers brushing lightly. "Thank you. Are you always this welcoming?" "Only when you like the guy," Sarah chuckled, sitting down at the table. "So, the plan, beach, promenade, maybe ice cream. Any objections?" "None," Ethan smiled, feeling her energy charging him. "You're the boss." They drank coffee, chatting about small things. Sarah told them about her latest magazine shoot, and Ethan shared a story about a colleague who spilled coffee on a client. Their conversations were as light as they had been on video calls, but now, sitting across from each other, Ethan felt even more connected. He pulled out his phone to take a photo of Sarah, laughing and holding a mug, the sun shining on her face. "Hey, I'm not ready," Sarah pretended to be offended, but posed with her tongue stuck out. "This is a masterpiece," Ethan showed her the photo. "Right on the story." "Go ahead," Sarah shrugged. "But if I look stupid, you owe me ice cream." Ethan opened Instagram and uploaded a photo to his story, adding the caption, "Le Morning with the Best Tour Guide." He hadn't thought about his privacy settings, forgetting that Lee was still on his close friends list, a list he'd created during their relationship and hadn't cleared out since the breakup. He put his phone down, unaware that he'd just lit the fuse. They packed up and drove to Venice Beach. The boardwalk was bustling with life. Street artists painted portraits, musicians played reggae, and the smell of hot dogs mingled with the sea breeze. Sarah led Ethan down the alley, pointing out her favorite graffiti. "I shot this for a magazine," she said, pointing to a wall with a bright image of a shark. "I spent an hour persuading the artist to pose." "And did you agree?" Ethan looked at her, admiring her enthusiasm. "Of course," Sarah grinned. "I can persuade." They bought ice cream vanilla for Sarah, chocolate for Ethan, and sat on a bench overlooking the ocean. Ethan felt at home, as if Los Angeles had always been a part of his life. He took Sarah's hand, and she squeezed his fingers back. Back at her apartment that evening, they decided to order pizza and watch a movie. Ethan picked up his phone to choose delivery and noticed an Instagram notification, a message from Lee. His stomach clenched. He hadn't spoken to her since the night he left the loft, and her name had sparked a flare of anger. He opened the chat, and her words cut into his eyes. "Seriously, Ethan? This girl? She looks like a librarian. Have you really stooped that low?" Sarah, noticing his gaze, put down the pizzeria menu. "What happened?" she asked, her voice soft. Ethan sighed, looking at the screen. "Lee, my ex. I forgot she was a close friend. Saw the story and wrote." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Seriously? So what?" Ethan paused. Absolutely nothing that made sense, just like her. Ethan smiled and blocked Lee. He put his phone down and looked at Sarah. "I blocked her." "Good girl," Sarah smiled, moving closer. "She's not worth your time." "I am." "That's true," Ethan laughed, hugging her. "Thank you. You make everything easier." "That's my superpower," Sarah winked. "Now let's order pizza. I'm going for pepperoni." Ethan told her about Lee, not going into detail, but enough for Sarah to understand. Sarah listened without interrupting, her hand resting on his. "She was wrong," Sarah said when he finished. "You're not ordinary. You're the person I want to be with, and I'm not going to let you go." Ethan looked into her eyes, feeling her words fill the void Lee had left. "I don't want to let you go either." They kissed, softly but with a confidence that grew with each passing day. The pizza arrived, and they ate straight from the box on the couch. Sarah put on a comedy, but they talked more than they watched. Ethan felt free not just from Lee, but from all the doubts she had planted in him. Sarah was his rock, and her support made him stronger. When the movie ended, Sarah yawned. "Staying another day, huh?" "Two," Ethan smiled. "If you don't mind." "Against." Sarah poked him in the ribs. "I'm already planning breakfast. Pancakes or waffles?" "Pancakes," Ethan nodded. "With maple syrup." "Agreed." Sarah snuggled up to him, and they sat in silence, listening to the city outside the window. Ethan sat in lax, sipping coffee from a paper cup. His flight to Chicago was delayed an hour, and he scrolled through his phone, smiling at the texts from Sarah. She'd written, "Miss you already. When's the next visit?" with a heart emoji. Ethan had replied, "In 2 weeks, if I can stand it without your tacos." They were in their third month of long-distance dating, and despite the miles between Los Angeles and Chicago, their connection was only growing stronger. After his trip to Los Angeles, where he and Sarah shared their first kiss under the stars at the Griffith Observatory, they decided to give a relationship a try, despite the distance. Ethan returned to his apartment in Logan Square, but his thoughts were with Sarah. They called each other almost every night, exchanging photos, Sarah of sunsets, Ethan of Chicago skyscrapers. A month later, Sarah flew to Chicago, and Ethan showed her around the city. They ate pizza at Lou Malnati's, walked through Millennium Park, laughed at his attempt to skate at Cloud Gate. "You're like Bambi on ice," Sarah said, holding his hand as he staggered. "It's part of my charm," Ethan grinned, falling to the ice. "Now it's your turn." Sarah laughed and helped him up. Her warmth, her ability to find joy in the little things, was what Ethan had been searching for all his life. She was the opposite of Lee, no guile, no arrogance. With her, he felt not just loved, but understood. Now, at the airport, Ethan thought about how their relationship had changed him. After Lee, he'd been afraid to trust, but Sarah had broken down his walls. Her sincerity in every text, every call, every look inspired him to think about the future. Not just dating, but something more, something serious. He was in no rush, but he knew he was ready for commitment if it was with her. 2 weeks later, Sarah flew back to Chicago. Ethan met her at O'Hare Airport with a bouquet of daisies, her favorite. She ran to him, hugging him as if she hadn't seen him in months, not weeks. "Are you carrying flowers now?" Sarah smiled, sniffing the bouquet. "It's official. I'm impressed." I'm trying. Ethan took her suitcase. Ready for the Chicago winter. If it's you and hot chocolate, then yes, Sarah winked, pulling on her scarf. They spent the weekend bundled up in warm jackets, walking the snowy streets. On Saturday night, sitting in his apartment with pizza and wine, they first talked about the future. Sarah sat on the couch, her legs tucked under her hair falling over her shoulders. Listen, she began, swirling her glass. I was thinking, my projects in LA are cool, but I'm not tied down. I can work from anywhere. What if I moved to Chicago? Ethan froze, his eyebrows raising. Really? You'd move? That's a big step. I know, Sarah nodded, her gaze serious but warm. But I'm tired of all these flights. I want to be closer to you, if you don't mind, of course. Against. Ethan laughed, putting down his glass. Sarah, I'm all for it. But it's your decision. Los Angeles is your home. Home is where I'm happy, Sarah shrugged. And I'm happy with you. Plus, Chicago's cool. I can already see myself taking pictures of those skyscrapers. Ethan felt a warmth in his chest. Her words were simple, but they meant everything. He took her hand. If you move, I'll help. We'll find you a studio, show you the best bars. But, are you sure? 100%, Sarah smiled. Let's try. Not right away, but maybe in a couple of months. Deal, Ethan nodded, squeezing her fingers. I want this. With you. They continued talking, planning. Sarah suggested renting an apartment in the West Loop, closer to downtown, so they could travel to shoots. Ethan talked about his desire to open a marketing agency, and Sarah immediately became excited about the idea of shooting a promo for him. Their conversations were a mixture of dreams and practicality, and Ethan realized that for the first time in his life, the future was not an abstraction, but a reality. A month later, Ethan was back in Los Angeles. Sarah was working on an exhibition, and he was helping her sort through the photographs in her studio. They sat on the floor, surrounded by prints, arguing over which image to choose for the centerpiece. This one, Ethan pointed to the portrait of a street musician. It's catchy. Sarah narrowed her eyes. I like the one with the kid on the bike. He's alive. Okay, you're a photographer, you know better. Ethan raised his hands, smiling. But I'm taking this one to my office when I open an agency. Deal, Sarah laughed, bumping her shoulder with him. Are you serious about the agency? Yes, Ethan nodded. I've already started a business plan. It's scary, but with you, I feel like I can do it. Sarah looked at him, her eyes softening. You can do it, Ethan. You're smart, you're persistent, and I'm with you. Ethan leaned down and kissed her, feeling her words strengthen his resolve. Their kiss was soft but full of confidence. Sarah pulled away, smiling. If I move, you owe me a taco every day. I can do that, Ethan chuckled, but you're making coffee. Deal, Sarah nodded, returning to the photographs. The next few months were a roller coaster of visits. Ethan flew to Los Angeles, Sarah to Chicago. They spent Thanksgiving at Tom and Emily's, where Sarah charmed everyone with stories about the shoot. At Christmas, they decorated the tree in Ethan's apartment, laughing at his crooked lights. Every moment, from morning coffee to late-night conversations, strengthened their bond. One day in March, they were sitting on Sarah's balcony in Los Angeles, eating pizza and looking out at the city lights. Sarah turned to him, her face thoughtful. I talked to the agent, she said. I can break the lease in 2 months. If all goes according to plan, I'll be in Chicago by summer. Ethan smiled, his heart jumping. Is this real? You're moving. Yeah, Sarah nodded, her smile wide. I'm already looking at studios in Chicago. I want something with big windows like this one. We'll find it, Ethan took her hand. And I'll help you move. I'll even carry all the boxes myself. Don't overdo it, Sarah laughed. But I appreciate it. You know, I never thought I'd be this happy. You changed everything. Ethan looked into her eyes, feeling her sincerity fill him. You too, Sarah. I didn't know I could feel this way, and I want it to last." "For how long?" Sarah raised an eyebrow, but her tone was playful. "You're the one show." "About us," Ethan smiled. "I'm serious, Sarah. I want to build a life with you. Not just from a distance, but together." Sarah leaned down and kissed him, her lips warm. "Me too, Ethan. Let's do this." Ethan stood on the roof of a high-rise building in downtown Chicago, admiring the panorama of the city. The skyscrapers sparkled in the rays of the setting sun, reflected in the dark surface of the river, and the warm July breeze carried the distant sounds of the streets. The roof had been transformed into a romantic retreat, a small round table covered with a white tablecloth, two chairs, candles in glass holders, and garlands with warm yellow bulbs, creating a cozy semi-darkness. On the table were a bottle of red wine, two glasses, and a plate of pasta carbonara prepared by the restaurant below. Everything was ready for Sarah, who was due to arrive any minute. Ethan adjusted the cuffs of his navy shirt, his pulse quickening. In the breast pocket of his jacket was a velvet box containing a ring, a delicate one with a small diamond that he had chosen with trepidation, imagining how it would sparkle on Sarah's finger. He was going to propose to her today, and it filled him with joy, mixed with a little excitement. He took out the box, opened it, looked at the ring, and smiled. Everything was perfect. A year ago, he couldn't imagine being here. Lee's betrayal, her secret meetings with Nick, her words that he would never find anyone better, nearly destroyed him. He was broken, he doubted himself, but that breakup was the beginning of a new journey. Without it, he wouldn't have gone to his high school reunion, he wouldn't have learned about Sarah from Jenna, he wouldn't have written to her. Sarah, with her ringing laugh, her photographs, her ability to see the world more brightly, had become his light. She hadn't just brought back his love, she had shown him what it meant to be with someone who respected you. Ethan was grateful even for the pain of the past, because it had brought him to this moment. He walked to the edge of the roof, looking out over the city. Chicago had become their home. Sarah had moved here 2 months ago, as they had planned, renting a studio in the West Loop with huge windows where she now worked on her photography projects. They spent almost every night together, cooking dinner in his Logan Square apartment, going to local bars, walking by the lake. Their life was simple but warm, and Ethan knew he wanted to keep it that way. "Everything in place?" asked Marco, the restaurant manager, as he came up to the roof with a tray of tiramisu, Sarah's favorite dessert. "Yes," Ethan nodded, looking around the table. "Looks about right. Thanks, Marco." "No question," Marco smiled. "She will be delighted. When can we expect her?" "In about 15 minutes, Ethan glanced at his watch. "I said it was a regular dinner. She doesn't know." "A surprise is always a hit," Marco winked. "We're downstairs, if anything. Good luck." "Thank you." Ethan shook his hand, and Marco left, leaving him alone. Ethan pulled out his phone and texted Sarah, "Are you coming soon? Dinner's getting cold." She responded, "In the cab, almost there. What's this secret place?" Ethan smiled and texted, "See you soon. The view is amazing." He put his phone away and began lighting candles, their flames flickering, creating a warm atmosphere. His movements were confident, but inside he felt a little trepidation. This was his chance to make Sarah happy, and he wasn't going to waste it. As he set out the glasses, his mind wandered back to their history. That first video call, when her laugh had made his heart leap. Their kiss in Los Angeles, under the stars at the Griffith Observatory. Her move to Chicago, her support as he launched his marketing agency. Sarah hadn't just been his girlfriend, she'd been his partner, his inspiration. And tonight, he wanted to make their bond last forever. Ethan touched the box in his pocket, but decided not to take it out yet. He wanted everything to be perfect the moment, the words, her smile. But then he stopped, turned as if to an invisible crowd, and smiled, his eyes glittering. "Look," he said, his voice light but conspiratorial. "You've been with me all this way. You've seen me fall, you've seen me find Sarah, you've seen her change my life. And now I'm going to propose. But this is our secret, okay? Not a word until she gets here. Deal?" He winked, his smile warm and slightly mischievous. The gesture was for those who followed his story, his way of sharing the joy, of making them part of the moment. Ethan reached into his pocket, pulled out the box, quickly opened it, glanced at the ring, and put it back, making sure Sarah couldn't see. His wink was brief, but full of confidence, as if he knew everything would be okay. "Ethan," Sarah's voice came from the elevator. "Is this here?" Ethan winced, his smile widening. "Upstairs. Get up," he called, adjusting the tablecloth one last time. Sarah's heels clicked on the stairs, and Ethan turned toward the entrance. She appeared in the doorway, wearing a black dress that showed off her figure, her hair down, and carrying a small purse. When she saw the roof, the candles, the garlands, the table, she froze, her eyes widening. "Oh, God, Ethan," she breathed, stepping closer. What did you do?" "Just dinner," Ethan shrugged, but his eyes betrayed his excitement. "Do you like it?" "Like it?" Sarah laughed, her voice full of surprise. "It's like something out of a romantic movie. You actually rented a rooftop." "Just for us." Ethan took her hand, leading her to the table. "Sit down. Wine." "Yes, of course." Sarah sat up, looking around. "You're scaring me. What's the reason?" Ethan poured the wine, trying to sound calm. "I want this to be an evening to remember." Sarah smiled, her gaze softening. "You always make everything unforgettable. I mean it." They clinked glasses, and Ethan felt his nerves ease. They began dinner, sampling pasta and chatting. Sarah told him about her latest photo shoot in the park, where a squirrel stole her sandwich, and Ethan complained about a client who wanted viral advertising for pennies. Their conversation was light, familiar, but Ethan knew that would soon change. "You know," he said, putting his plate aside, "I've been thinking a lot about us, about how we came here." Sarah leaned closer, her smile warm. "What do you think?" "You changed my life." Ethan looked into her eyes. "I was in a bad place until I met you. You're, you're everything I could have ever dreamed of." Sarah took his hand, her fingers squeezing his. "Ethan, you too. I didn't think I'd find someone like you." Ethan smiled, sensing the moment approaching. He turned back to the invisible audience, his voice lower. "Remember, not a sound," he said, winking with a slight grin. "It's about to happen." Sarah frowned at his gaze. "Who are you talking to?" she asked, laughing. "Just getting ready," Ethan returned to her, his smile innocent. He stood up, his heart pounding in his throat. "Sarah, I want to tell you something." She looked at him, her eyes shining in the candlelight. "What?" Ethan slowly dropped to one knee, pulling the box out of his pocket. He opened it, revealing a ring that glittered in the dim light. Sarah gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Ethan looked at her, his voice firm but full of love. "Sarah, you are my happiness," he said. "I want to spend every day with you, share everything, laughter, dreams, life. Will you be my wife?" Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.